Good morning, my friends, and welcome to Lifelong Educators. I can see that we have a number of people in our audience today. I see Dana and Katie and Pablo and Robert and Luke. Welcome, everyone. This is the place to come if you are interested in education and what big tech can do for the future of education. And especially for you, the entrepreneur who might be an educator, might be just interested in education or a student, whatever. This is the place for you to come and build a community with us and start to share ideas about how you can bring your dreams to life. And today we have an outstanding guest. It is John Gamba. He is amazing, and he is the entrepreneur in residence and director of innovative programs at Penn for their Graduate School of Education. And alongside him, we have the amazing Josh Chernikoff, who is the senior advisor to Click2, an online learning platform. So today, we're going to be trying to answer your questions and help you, as we said, achieve your dreams. We are going to find out where you can find access to capital to build those dreams. We're going to find out where all around the world you can access these things and bring your dreams to life. And we're going to see how technology is framing the future of education. I mean, myself, I'm an educator. I'm blown away by what these two gentlemen have let me know so far, and how we can bring about the entrepreneur in you, our audience. Just want you to know that you can put your comments, your questions in the chat, and you can talk directly today to both Josh and to John. So having said that, I am Jackie Gusta. I'll be your host for Lifelong Educators. I'm an associate professor of media arts at Western Connecticut State University. So good morning, gentlemen. How are you doing? Josh.
Good morning.
Good. Thank you. Good. Very good. Happy to be here with John.
Great. And John, you are our star guest. Yeah.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me to be on the show.
Look, it's our honor. So what I'd like to ask you at first, this is a pretty big title, Entrepreneur in Residence and Director of Innovative Programs at Penn. So what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, that's a mouthful, isn't it?
Yeah.
First, I'll start by saying that our dean, Dr. Pam Grossman, came out of Stanford, and our executive director, Dr. Michael Golden, he himself is an entrepreneur. So in developing Catalyst at Penn GSE, a center within the Graduate School of Education that advances innovation in worldwide education, it was very important for them to bring in people and professionals who actually have served in entrepreneurial capacity. So being an ed tech entrepreneur myself, that checked the first box, and being somebody who has been involved in advancing innovation in worldwide education, that checked the second box. We're a team of change makers who are truly committed to advancing innovation in worldwide education. And we do that through a continuum of programming that includes webinars and boot camps and meetups. And our signature program, the Milken Penn GSE Business Plan Competition, which is now in its 12th year. As I've come into my role, I've sort of pioneered two programs that have been added to Catalyst at Penn GSE. Our Entrepreneur in Residence program, where we meet and mentor and coach ed tech entrepreneurs, and Entrepreneur Breakthroughs, which is a monthly convening of entrepreneurs who talk about the seminal issues in education. So it's great to be here. It's great to be in this role. I am a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania, so it was part of a life dream to come back to the university and be serve in an administrative capacity.
Awesome. But it always wasn't that way. You were a corporate guy at first, were you not?
Yeah, I was. I don't know if I hesitate to say I was a corporate guy. I was a high-tech consultant at KPMG in their strategy consulting group in Washington, D.C. But before that, I have to say, I worked as a investigator in the Washington, D.C. public defender's office. I actually had an aspiration early on in my career to be a litigating pro bono attorney. My hero at Penn when I graduated was a gentleman by the name of Morris Dees, who is the head of the Southern Law Poverty Center. And I thought I was going to go on to a career of kind of, litigating in courtrooms and providing pro bono defendant services to those who are in need. Through that experience, I quickly learned that I didn't want to be a litigating pro bono attorney. And I turned my sights to corporate America and started my career at KPMG and had a great sort of training ground in business fundamentals and marketing and strategy and product development right around the time that the internet and the World Wide Web, this is aging me quite a bit, was becoming the internet and World Wide Web in the mid-90s.
Wow. And you veered off. So let me go to Josh for just a moment. Josh, how did you become the senior advisor to Click2? What was your path to that?
So one of the things that John didn't mention that doesn't show up on a LinkedIn profile or the first 6 minutes of this show is that he's also a really caring, good person who still does a lot of pro bono work, mentoring people. And after I was able to sell my second company in the education space, John gave me a lot of wind in my sales to go out there and start working with some companies and hopefully kind of following in his footsteps to mentor and collaborate with other CEOs in the ed tech space. And one of those was Click2, and the CEO at Click2, Dotan, who I've gotten very close with, who for many decades I was, kind of doing the same thing, in-person enrichment. He was doing camps, and we both wanted to be in the ed tech space, and we figured out how to work together.
Wow. So John, you ran into Josh. How did you originally get into the area of education?
Yeah, it's a great question, and thanks for the compliment, Josh. But the feelings are mutual. Being able to work with you and coach you and mentor you and even learn from you in a lot of ways is bilateral. It's certainly not unilateral. I think of coaching and mentoring and advising as not doing something to impart my knowledge, but to kind of set up collisions for whoever you're working with to kind of run into the answers themselves to life's questions, especially as we're all on this ed tech entrepreneurial journey. So right back at you. After my career start at KPMG in corporate America, I had what I would consider my first professional life dream come true in the late 90s, where I had an opportunity to work with my father. My father was a corporate executive in a Fortune 500 company. He was on his way to retiring early with an early retirement package. And he was like, I'm overseeing and managing a company with 80,000 employees. I'd love to get into this brave new world of internet investing and internet technology development and really figure out what it was all about. And I said, it just so happens in my early career, Dad, I want to learn from you who's been successful. And he became my mentor and my backer in a company called Incubate, which was a ed tech incubator of new businesses right at the time when ed tech was just starting to become a thing, in 1998, 1999. So first life dream comes true. I'm working with my dad. He backs me with a little bit of financial capital, and we start looking at business plans in the ed tech space. Incidentally, this is the year literally when Blackboard, Michael Chasen from Blackboard was founded, and the plot thickens with that founding story, because later, about 9 years later, the company that we founded through that incubator exited to Blackboard in a life-changing all-cash deal.
But your dad wasn't always the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, was he?
No, it's a great question as well. I'd like to say that education is in our bones as a family. My dad was a school board chairperson in the 70s of a small school district outside of Philadelphia. My mom's been a statistics professor at a community college. My sister was a Montessori teacher. So together as a family, the impact of education has always been felt and has always been in our bones. My parents were both the first to graduate from high school, yet alone college, in their families. And, as they were brought up, their parents, my grandparents, always said, education, education, education. That's really the ticket. They took that to heart. And really the rest is history in both my mom and my dad's career, but especially in my dad's career as he retired from that Fortune 500 company and then went on to start investing in internet companies, including backing our EdTech incubator.
So your parents were heavily into education. What made them expand and reach out to others to give that gift of education to them?
Yeah, as we started thinking and continued on our careers, me in ed tech and my sister as a Montessori teacher and having some financial means, the family put up the resources to start the Gamba Family Foundation in 2008 and really decided to do anything and everything to try to close the achievement gap for inner city schools. So we started to invest, especially in Washington, D.C., where my sister Beth is our executive director and lives, investing in things like the Capital Teaching Residency and Teach for America and City Bridge Foundation, really to advance what we could consider the deeper learning movement, developing critical thinking skills, creative problem solving skills in our future generation for college and career readiness. So we're not a large foundation, we're not huge, but we like to celebrate that we just gave away our $1,000,000th to some of the causes that I just named. And we're very proud of what we've done. And I'm personally very proud of my sister as our executive director, being the champion of these causes and being judicious in who we invest in and what the impact is for those investments.
Josh, I'm looking at your face and it seems that what John just said has inspired something in you. You want to share it?
I talk to John Gamba probably every other day on the phone or text every other day on the phone. And I had no idea that they had just given away their $1,000,000. So congratulations to the Gamba Family Foundation. And that's just the type of guy John is in terms of, just going about his business in the education space. And I think, it's nice to work with people in the education space who, understand kind of that double bottom line, doing good and also making some good money for your family. That's always helpful. But I just think that entrepreneurs out there can learn a lot from each other, from people like John, and I've been lucky enough to surround myself with other great entrepreneurs. And if you take the time to listen, like right now, and learn, it helps days, months, years later.
Yeah. And by the way, Josh, Luke Homan is saying hello to you.
Yeah, Luke's a good dude. Luke and John and I will probably have a conversation at one point. Luke's got a great company in First Root, and he's championing an idea on participatory budgeting through PTAs. So I think we'll have a good conversation about that.
Yeah. And actually, in time, we can talk more about that project. And if there are any others of you out there in the audience right now who have something to say or want to share your project or share your idea with both Josh and John, put it in the chat and we'll open it up. So I want to ask John, Josh had mentioned that intersection between doing good and also making a buck. We need both. And as you know, teaching, John, you know that, Josh, you know this, teaching is a calling. And I recall during a meeting in the state of New Jersey where a teacher asked the governor why teachers don't make more money. And the governor said, well, you knew what this business was like when you got into it, except the low pay. But you guys are offering opportunities to people who want to teach in a different way outside of the classroom. I mean, it might be in the classroom, but you're talking about a different economic model, profits for educators. So I'm going to ask John first. Can you tell us one project that you've seen in your time, either at Penn or through the Gamba Family Foundation, that you supported and did both, made money for the educator and did good?
Yeah. First, let me just acknowledge your comments on the importance of teaching and the vocation of teaching. And as I shared, that's very much a cornerstone of our investment theses at the Gamba Family Foundation. I've given speaking engagements where we talk about the Lebron Jamesing of teaching. What does that mean? The Lebron Jamesing of teaching is we know our day has come when we wake up and we watch a show like Sex and the City, and the three stars are excited about dating a teacher, not a lawyer, not a doctor, not an athlete. That's when we know our time has come. I've yet to see that, but I'm very interested in the LeBron Jamesing of teaching, making sure that we're keeping the vocation of teaching ascendant. And I'll share a story. I work with probably 250 ed tech entrepreneurs every year. Many of which are practicing teachers, practicing administrators, those who have a lot of experience working inside the classroom. I love working with ed tech entrepreneurs who have actual teaching in classroom or practitioner experience. I'll share one example to answer your question directly. A husband and wife team in Providence, Rhode Island, Sylvia and Jared Hall, founded a company called Gabon, where it started. Their why was they wanted to have a connection with their son, Austin, who learns differently. They were having trouble with what a lot of parents have trouble with, which was when Austin was coming home from school and they asked, "Hey, Austin, how was school today?" "Fine." "What'd you learn?" "Nothing." How many of us can kind of relate to that as we get have children who move into their teens and their high school years? And Jared and Sylvia wanted to do something about that. So instead of just kind of dreaming up and creating a new product or service, they went and they talked to Austin's teacher. And Austin's teacher said, "Hey, I have a pretty good relationship with Austin. I have an idea. Next time that Austin leaves the classroom, I'm going to prompt him with what he learned, what he felt good about today, what inspired him today. And I'm going to listen to what he says because he's pretty communicative in the classroom. Then I'm going to email you what he said, and we're going to see what happens." And Gabon was born. So the next day, at the end of school, teacher went up to Austin and said, "What inspired you today?" And Austin said, "Onion skin and lake water." And that had been the subject of a biology unit where they had a trip to the lake where they put onion skin in, and they were talking about what happens in a reaction from water to that onion. He went home, and his parents that night said, "Austin, what happened at school?" "Nothing." "What'd you learn?" "Nothing." "Was there anything about onion skin and lake water?" And Austin's eyes lit up. He said, "Yeah, we went to the lake and we learned about molecules and atoms. And you know, Dad, there's this nucleus." And there was a conversation. And I kind of get chills about that founding story because as Gabon was born, they started thinking to themselves, because Sylvia and Jared have a technology background. Jared works at Google and Sylvia has a marketing social media background. They started saying, what if we created the Twitter for family engagement, a network that prompts a student to have conversations with their parents at an appropriate time over a sustained period? What would happen? Well, they brought this model to the University of Pennsylvania's Graduate School of Education, and this is kind of how it works at Catalyst at Penn GSE. And our researchers lit up. They were like, it's settled science. We know that a more engaged parent is a higher achieving student. But what happens when the student initiates that communication? And what happens when that gets sustained over time? So we worked with Gabon to come up with a research design to actualize that vision, develop it over a technology which Jared and Sylvia are leading. And now it's just been groundbreaking. They're delivering it to military connected families and asking essential questions of what happens with habitual student-led communications with military connected families. They're deploying it to different school districts. They're deploying it in general education as well as with students with disabilities, and unbelievably groundbreaking. If you ask them, they would say none of that would have happened if they didn't have those raw conversations and kind of co-created or co-constructed Gabon with the insight of that classroom teacher. So that would just be one example of just a a really interesting product or service that was born out of the classroom with two caring parents that's now being sustained and scaling over time.
Wow, that's amazing. And, you know, as an educator, I know how important it is to have parental support for your students and their success. So I've just got to ask you, do you have any data as how well Gabon worked, for instance, like inner city families?
Yeah, so right now that research design is asking those essential questions. So one is, what happens when a student initiates the conversation with the parent, and that happens over a sustained period of time. So what happens when you go one full week with it happening every day, one full month, one full semester? And they're testing those types of questions. After they look at those essential questions, they're also looking at the engagement levels. Do the students actually display more self-confidence? Do they display more self-awareness? And is it actually translating into student success? Does that motivation, does that conversation translate into positive performance in school? On the flip side, we're also tracking, and this is very much part of the research, are the parents finding it easier to connect with school? So think of it as a Yelp rating. So thumbs up, thumbs down, based on that initiated conversation. So it's not just the conversation, it's the impact of the conversation and how that's translating into social emotional learning skills, how it's translating into actual student success and performance on tests, and how it's performing to develop the whole child. And we're doing this in several different proving grants: urban ed, rural ed, military connected families, suburban environments, and looking at the different trends of where this student-led habitual communications with parents is actually working best, extracting that data and trying to build on that as we continue to co-construct the product.
John, don't tell the whole Gabon story, because they sound like a great guest for us, I think.
Yeah, they tell the story a lot better than me, and they would be terrific in terms of sharing the story and really being humble. Think about that, the founding story coming out of the classroom, being so committed to your son who you just want to have a relationship with, and then developing a technology that's research based where you're measuring the outcomes. It's almost the prototypical venture that we like to work with at Catalyst to Penn GSE.
Let me ask a question. How important is that founding story? When you're out there as an entrepreneur and you're talking to investors, whatever stage it is, seed, whatever, how important is that founding story to people who are listening?
I think it's critically important. So I also give a master class called Pitch Perfect Presentations. And, I have my notes like literally right here because it's one of my favorite master classes. And I say, number one, open with a personal story, quote, or relatable anecdote. And I actually show examples of the best pitches really open with that founding story. When you see Sylvia and Jared give that pitch, they always start with the, how'd you do at school today? Fine. What'd you learn? Nothing. And you just kind of lean in on that. And when I leaned in on it, I was like, should I be embarrassed to say that that's how I feel about my 12-year-old? I'm supposed to be this engaged parent who's working on these projects, but I struggle with some of the same things because my son thinks I'm a nerd and doesn't want to have a relationship with me in a lot of ways. But if I can be prompted with things that he's interested in, Star Wars and YouTube channels and interestingly enough, international politics, then maybe I should be prompted to initiate that conversation instead of just waiting. And so that's why the power of Gabon has worked so well, and why the story really resonates.
So now we've got a guest, and now, Jackie, we've got a cohort-based course by John Gamba, which we already have 2 people who want to sign up for. So we're doing pretty well.
Great, we certainly are. And Josh, you have a daughter who is, I believe, 6 or 7?
Six and a half.
6 years
And
old.
when you're half, that's a lot. So 6.5.
Yes. So John just told you what the future holds for you. So, but I hear that they return back to the fold when they turn 20 or so.
Okay.
So,
A few years.
yes, and then they're going to be your best friends. So we
Yeah.
do have a comment in a chat, gentlemen. Hi, Josh and John. This is from Zeph. And he says, my name is Zeph. I am the founder of Be a Maker Club. We are the modern day woodshop for school students teaching with 3D printing and computer aided design. So does that spark any inspiration in you two gentlemen, how Zeph might be able to be helped from your support?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in. I think Project Lead the Way is a great model to think about how the maker movement has absolutely revolutionized the deeper learning movement, as I talked about earlier. So the idea of actually building things, we like to say learning by doing. Some of the ventures that we're working with, we're not teaching math, we're doing math. We're not teaching language arts, we're doing language arts. And so I think absolutely. When I think about, I'm doing an episode later this afternoon about workforce development, and this concept of what does the future generations look like? What does college and career readiness really look like? And it really is about hands-on experiential learning, solving real problems for college and career readiness. There was an interesting report out. It was quoted, I think, in Saul Khan's One World Schoolhouse that said 85% of the jobs that a third grader would consider haven't been invented yet. I mean, so critically important to have models that was shared in chat related to real world problem solving, taking something from beginning to end and being able to build something, whether that's physically or even a digital portfolio, to demonstrate that you're a real world problem solver, that you're a critical thinker, that you're able to work with a team to actually build something, solve something, and present that in a truly specific way.
For sure.
And John's able to
Go
look
ahead,
at it from up here. John's able to look at it from up here. Absolutely. When I hear what Zeph has going on, Be a Maker, I'm still, although I've technically moved on from being the CEO of my two companies, I want to get in there with the CEO and learn more about Be a Maker. And, Zeph, are you thinking about going into schools? Is this an in-person play? Which definitely makes sense. And who do you go through? Is it through school districts or principals or PTAs? And then you also have to, at this point, think hybrid as well, and certainly we have an option out. There's lots of options out there. There's one good one out there, of course, in terms of doing a cohort-based course online. And the entrepreneurs that I'm talking to right now, a lot of them are in the enrichment space, and we're talking about being hybrid ready. Do your cohort-based courses in person if possible. Also offer them online to a worldwide audience. And then even if your in-person courses happen to be canceled because of COVID, or, the power goes out in Zeph's case, and the printer doesn't work, you could potentially go online if needed.
Great. Thanks for those comments, gentlemen. And at the end of this broadcast, I will ask you to put in the chat how anybody in our audience can get in touch with you today. So we have another comment from Katie Becker, who says, grateful to be listening and learning today. Loving the story of Gabon. My name is Katie Becker. I am the co-founder of Future Holders, a platform for gamification of leadership, finance, and entrepreneurial skills in kids. We are founded out of an innovative independent school, Aspen Academy in Colorado, by teachers and educational leaders. I am a former teacher and school principal, excited about this new opportunity. So, John, what can you say to Katie?
One of my other favorite subjects, game-based e-learning. What I'd say to Katie is that the research, again, I always come back to working at a major research university, shows that there are three truly distinguishing factors when it comes to digital learning platforms. This has been studied. Ted Mitchell, former Undersecretary of Education, Caitlin Donnelly, who runs Avalanche Ventures, did a study called Alive in the Swamp. And the Alive in the Swamp study looked at 1,000 edtech education digital learning platforms, and noticed that about 950 of them failed, 50 of them, 25 of them did fairly well, and 25 of them did super well. And they're the usual suspects that you hear about: the Nuzellas and the Pop Tropicas and the Dream Boxes and the Nearpods. And the question was asked, the research looked at what made them successful. And what it came down to, and I'm oversimplifying it, but for the comment in the chat, was three things. One was that the technology was truly engaging. Students these days really want to have a Fortnite or a Minecraft-like experience that includes leveling up, badges, rewards, and points. I would recommend a Lighthouse report called Synoptic Gaming. I'll put it in the chat, that talks about how we can take game theory from the gaming industry and inject it into the education space to create motivation and to build engagement for students. So the first distinguishing factor of those successful products and services was truly engaging, technologically advanced. Second is pedagogically aligned. So when she's talking about a platform like this, the question will be asked, does it align to standards? And more importantly, does it align to pedagogy? So after using this product or service, can we be sure that there was an actual positive outcome as it relates to either performing well on assessments, which are still what teachers are measured on, or more importantly, in my view, deeper learning movement, has it developed true critical thinking and metacognitive skills? And so that pedagogical alignment has to be there. It has to be measured and has to be tracked and reported. Third is what the report was calling true systems change. Was the implementation of this platform that I'm sorry, the name escapes me, shared. Who was it? Katie. Does it actually represent transformation in the education space? What does that mean? Well, many times entrepreneurs get the engagement and the technology right. They get the pedagogical alignment right, but they don't know how to implement it into the normal scope and sequence or the instructional episode of a typical K-12 class. So figuring out how to PD infuse or professional infuse the product so a teacher knows how to actually implement it with fidelity, along with lesson plans and unit guides, is definitely a key as well. And what we're finding is those ventures, Katie's venture that does all three of those things very well, maximizes their chances of having success for implementing something like that into the K-12 or the higher ed ecosystem.
It's absolutely awesome. And I'd like to bring something in because I see parallel, John, between something you do outside of EdTech and your EdTech ventures. You are an Ironman athlete, are you not?
I am. I have completed 3 Ironmans, 5 half Ironmans, and I was lucky enough to qualify for the half Ironman World Championships in Clearwater, Florida in 2010. That all said, comma, I like to say the older I get, the better I was. I am no longer competing. I'm doing more training, actually a physically challenged athletes. And but what an unbelievable rewarding experience to kind of, if anybody wants to check this out, my old blog was Golfer Turned Triathlete, where I had this crazy, I don't know what it is, but this crazy, I want to be a scratch golfer. I kind of did that. And then one day I woke up and said, I think I could swim across this lake, as I hooked a 9-iron into the lake and said, maybe triathlon was going to be for me. And the rest is history.
I'm no therapist or psychologist, John, but do you think that the scratch golfer turned Ironman turned successful entrepreneur has some kind of thread in your body of never giving up?
Yeah, I think so. So we've talked a lot about this, Josh. So Jackie asked, how do you kind of thread this all together? And I think about this notion of periodization, which is when I was at my best and able to compete at that kind of level, the difference was always how I could bring it back instead of pushing forward. So that's one of the first things that I'd share. What I mean by that is the haze in the barn. So we would train for a period of time, hit our peak, and then rest. And the growth happened in our rest. Well, bringing that to business, classic agile, classic sprints, go, 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 go. Post up through your SDLC, your software development lifecycle, the new build, and then take your team and rest. You can't just go, 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 or you'll burn out. In the case of triathlon, you'll get injured, which I was injured many times because my coach, my mentor would say, ease off, the hay's in the barn. And I would do one more 10-mile run thinking that I could get a little bit more fitness when I actually needed to rest. So I draw those types of parallels. I'll bring it all kind of together, that the great entrepreneurs and the great athletes represent or have that paradox of humility and will. Humility to be coached, humility to be advised, and will to run through walls and to do whatever it takes to win. Those that have both, which are rare, are the ones that typically are the entrepreneurs that are mega successful.
Mm. That's great advice, Dad. Thanks for sharing that with us. So the people in our audience today and the people who will see this broadcast repurposed in different forms, they're going to be interested in accessing capital to make their dreams happen. Now, you've told us what it takes inside of ourselves to have that will, to have that humility. How do you go out there and get the cash? If you're just somebody like Katie or Zeph in our audience.
So I'm going to be as brief on this one, but very passionate about it, and serve a layup or serve a softball up for Josh, because he was at GSV. I was not, ASU GSV. And this is a conference that is kind of the preeminent convener of education technology companies, policymakers, investors, for sure, partners. I think Click2 is there.
Yeah, GSV is
the
global
ASU
Silicon Valley.
Yeah,
it's
and they have
a conference for geniuses.
That's right, and it's every year.
That's why I was there and John was not invited.
Correct. But I'll say this, Josh can back me up. Everybody was talking about efficacy investing, efficacy in your products. Well, what is efficacy? I'm going to say true efficacy is going to make the difference in your ability to raise capital in this space. How do I look at efficacy? Everybody talks about it differently, but I'll break it down into 3 key points. Number 1 is the sequence by which you're developing your product or service. Too many entrepreneurs come to me with a product and say, I want to sell it. I want to get it out there. I need to go to market. I got go. And I say, hold on. The sequence should be, what is your theory of action or your theory of change? And what is your logic model? And what is the underlying research that proves that this is the right product or service to be differentiated, that could be invested in, sustained, and scale over time? Gab on, right? It's great that you wanted to connect with Austin, but what's the research basis for student-led habitual communications with families? And I advise the entrepreneurs on the sequence to start with that logic model. Start with your lean business canvas, where you're looking at your problem, your solution, your TAM, SAM, SOM, your key metrics that you want to measure, and not get ahead of yourself or over your skis by getting too focused on the product or service. So 1 is the sequence. This is the path to efficacy in my view. And I'm not God. I just try to apply collisions. 2, though, is transferability. In transferability, we see a lot of ventures that come to us and say, I got a contract in South Jersey with a superintendent. I'm like, how big is the district? 700 students. And I say, well, how are you going to transfer that contract or transfer what you're doing in Cherry Hill, New Jersey to LAUSD, where they have 1 million students? I'm not sure. So how do you get through the sequence of the underlying research into an MVP that can actually provide the intended outcome in a specific practitioner arena, and then transfer that to another larger district that has a whole different type of designated funding buckets and purchase decisions and way that the glacial pace by which education needs to be navigated. So the transferability is the second key gate to efficacy. And then 3rd is the scalability. I see a lot of ventures that get to that Series A, $15 million in value, raising $1 million or $2 million. They're getting bigger and bigger, but they're not able to think about how to scale from 15 million to 150 million, which I had the luck of being part of in my 9-year run, where we exited for 182 million. And that scalability component is critically important. Your business model with the underlying research has to be there. Your evaluative model on how you're measuring outcomes has to be there. The enterprise with your team and your OKRs. I'm a big John Doerr measure what matters fan, right? Your objectives and key results have to be in place. Your system specifications, this is BEST, right? Best practice for getting to efficacy ultimately through scale has to be there. What is the security, privacy, accessibility, interoperability standards and specifications that are being built into your product to ensure that you can sustain and scale your growth? And then ultimately the tactical implementation. What are you doing to get your product and service in front of customers after good customer discovery, and then co-create it or co-construct what you're developing with many adaptations and many pivots along the way, to me is the key to scalability, moving forward. And back to Alive in the Swamp, the research says those that really take it along that spectrum and push it through accordingly do well and are able to get an investment, sustain their value, ultimately scale to exit. And we're seeing that now. We can get into that, the capital markets, which are astronomical, never been bigger, if we want to dive into that. But I'd love Josh's perspective on what I said.
Well, first, Jackie, let's pause 41 minutes into this show and realize that we're doing it. What we set out to do on Lifelong Educators, we're doing. We've got a community of people who have joined. Granted, some of them are my family, but they're here and they're listening, and that's good. But we've got a lot of great entrepreneurs as well. And then, I have a pen here and I'm looking down. I'm not looking at my phone. I'm writing things down, theory of action, transferability, and scalability. We're lifelong educators. We're also lifelong learning. So I think first and foremost, John, is just to point out that, we set out to produce this community and starting to come together. So, obviously I think what you said makes a lot of sense. And I wrote it down and I'll start studying it.
Absolutely. And you know what? That's part, Josh, of what makes it so exciting is that we're always learning, and we're always learning new things that can make us amazing educators, much more amazing than we ever thought we could be. And we can touch so many different people all around the world. So I have on that line a comment in the chat, and it says, Buongiorno. I am the founder and CEO of Carousel of Languages, a foreign language program for infants, toddlers, and young children. We have successfully transitioned to remote live sessions, and I am researching options for Carousel digital development. Your suggestions? And this is from Patricia Corman.
Buongiorno. Josh, you want to start?
Yeah, when it comes to the curriculum part, I think that's there's an opportunity there to find curriculum developers. Certainly, we could talk about that. When you talk about deliverability of your product, I think it's trying to find the most seamless way to reach as many people as you can. And again, we're here because of a platform, Click2, and a platform that I believe in. So shameless plug, I have to do it because there's entrepreneurs here who, like myself, potentially were only able to do in person. And now, given that we've, a COVID opportunity here, we've crossed into an opportunity where kids can learn online. And, hopefully think about Click2 as your opportunity to seamlessly take your learning online so that, the kids in Florida can learn French with the kids in Washington State and all over the world. So that would be my part in terms of reaching a worldwide audience and scaling your business, to John's point.
I'll go macro first and micro second, because I want to build on something Josh said earlier that I think is really critical and important and seminal. So macro first, never has this been a greater time to be in the education space. So Holland IQ projects that the education space in general will be a $10 trillion industry by 2030. And you're really just looking at the market opportunity. So that's number one. Number two is no other micro space, ed tech, is growing as fast as ed tech. So ed tech was growing at 13% CAGR over the last, say, 5 years. That's grown to 16% during the time of COVID. So what industries besides ed tech, where 1 billion learners are moving online, is growing at that kind of growth? And you really need to think about that. So probably about $100 billion spent on global ed tech 5 years ago. It's supposed to be 500 billion this year. That kind of growth is insane in terms of the opportunities to really innovate, differentiate, and ultimately scale. 3 is the capital markets. We know that this year will be a record year. We had $10 billion invested in the space in the first half of 2021. Last year, 16 billion. Probably going to be somewhere on the order of 25 billion with the US leading. Where are we seeing those investments? Well, number one, we know that Masterclass raised over $100 million. We know that Age of Learning, an online digital learning product, raised, I think, over 300 million. And Kajabi, right, one of the leaders in developing online learning applications, just raised $550 million. So astronomical investments in this space. Super exciting in terms of education in general, ed tech specifically in the capital markets. That's sort of macro. So I wouldn't be any more excited to be in an area where you can do good and do well. So that gets me very excited as an entrepreneur who is purpose-driven. To Josh's point, now with the pandemic, and we like to say never let a crisis go to waste, we have unbelievable channels of development. So we can sell directly into schools who are often doing hybrid learning models within school and at home. Direct to consumer models, which is figuring out how to actually provide learning solutions into the home paid for by consumers or parents. And hybrid models, where you might want to do a deal with a publisher, or do a deal with a distributor, or do a deal with an LMS where they're promoting or prompting your product or service, through their learning management system. Try to be careful of the buzzword bingo and a lot of these acronyms. But I think from a macro level, we've never seen an opportunity this big in the space ever. Remember, 500 million was invested in 2010 in the ed tech space, 25 billion this year. That is just insane growth. And it's the usual suspects. It's the owls, it's the GSBs, it's the new markets, it's the rethinks. They're all doing incredible work. And when you ask them, what is the difference in who you're investing in? What will they say? Efficacy and equity. They'll talk about equitable access, equitable experiences, and equitable outcomes.
And John, just to you kind of did the ABCs of investors who we were fortunate at Click2 to sit down with a bunch of them at ASU GSV. And a mentor of mine at one point, told me, don't start building your network and getting to know people when you're in a crisis. Do it long before. And so I think, Jackie, to your question of raising capital, it starts with relationships, and it starts with getting comfortable with your founder's story and the direction you want to go, and telling those efficacy stories and building on them, and failing, of course, and failing. That's part of it as well. But I think, from my standpoint, a few years younger than John at this point, and a few more failures under my belt, which you can learn from. It's important to go to places like ASU GSV. It was an in-person conference, but we have online conferences as well, and start building that network, start joining these chats. We just saw a company, Flow Ops, that I'm getting to know as well, and just start talking to people and hearing the good, the bad, and the very ugly, about your business, only so you and your business can grow.
Yeah.
I'll build on that, Josh. So in the spirit of lifelong learning, the magic 3 that I think are important. So Learn Launch in January is an important conference. South by Southwest EDU. I love that conference in Austin, and ASU GSV. You know, these are sort of the, you know, the triple crown of ed tech. But then it's also important to subscribe with your Google alerts and to subscribe to different newsletters. EdSurge is a must. You know, 78 million Ed Week, the Ed Tech podcast. A lot of these things we have partnerships with that I think are important. This thirst for learning, this thirst for being coachable, this thirst for developing relationships, I agree is important. And then in terms of Josh's comment on be careful about going out and trying to raise at a time of crisis, I would flip that a little and say, turn a crisis into an opportunity. What about that crisis can you leverage to differentiate your product and service and take advantage of the opportunity? For example, anybody who's in the digital learning space trying to sell into schools right now will know that the ARP and the ESSER programs, ESSER 1, 2, and 3, $13 billion, $54 billion, and $122 billion respectively, is an unprecedented amount of capital that is being poured into schools so that they can spend that on digital learning solutions that close the learning gap or address COVID slide, and things that are particularly geared towards students that have been historically underrepresented or marginalized. So if you don't know how much of that ARP where those ESSER funds are going into school districts and LEAs in your area, look it up because it's publicly accessible, and you need to know because those are liquid funds that could be spent on your product or service.
Jackie, just one thing for the entrepreneurs out there who are trying to scribble as much as I am. Learn, launch, southbysouthwest.edu, ASU GSV, subscribe to things like EdSurge, and shameless plug, Entrepreneur Breakthroughs for John Gamba, which I believe is at 2:00 East today. He's doing double duty for us. And that's just a fantastic monthly group to join, you know, very similar to this, smart entrepreneurs. And it's great to be around other entrepreneurs because you can see and hear the struggles. And so you kind of feel like a community and then learn from that together and get to different places in your business and in life together.
And John, the name of your podcast again is what?
Entrepreneur Breakthroughs. You can go to calendly.com/John Gamba, and you'll see an overview of upcoming topics. This today is breakthroughs in workforce development with two rock star entrepreneurs in the workforce development space, Chisa from Petal and David from Higher Cause. Next month is breakthroughs in student safety and security with a rock star founder who is a former Navy SEAL who has come up with a weapons detection technology for schools. They just raised their Series A, over $20 million, former Wharton graduates. Just every month we try to feature an entrepreneur and talk about how they've broken through with a lot of the values that Josh talked about, right? Grit, fail fast, fail smart, test and measure, adapt and pivot. A lot of these messages come through when we ask, how'd you do it? You know, Gabon was featured. A couple of the other ventures that have come through our programs have been featured in Entrepreneur Breakthroughs. Josh was featured with some of the products and services that he's been part of. So he's been an illustrious guest at Entrepreneur Breakthroughs as well. Calendly.com/John Gamba.
The last thing that should be on that list is to have good, smart, caring, successful entrepreneurs in your corner as well. And that's who John has been. So show up for that. You'll learn from him. You'll learn from the other people. We're all kind of cut from the same cloth.
Very good. So unfortunately, we are running short on time, and I'm loving this conversation, guys. I think we've gotten a lot of good information out to our community. But John, I want to give you a hypothetical question.
Uh-oh.
So you look to the future of education, and not only here in the States, but around the world, right? To underserved communities where they don't even have internet access. What do you see in the future, and what would you like to imagine?
So I really like to think about education through an equity lens. And what that means is thinking about first entrepreneurs, founders who come from historically underrepresented or marginalized communities. I feel like those entrepreneurs know best how to serve and support models and frameworks that are going to address the issues that we need to address in public education. Second is when I think about equitable access, I think we have a lot to do to invest in and ensuring that our most marginalized or underrepresented students have access to high quality public education. And that is not the case right now. If you look at our rankings, I think we're 28th and 29th respectively in math and English language arts compared to other industrialized nations. It's ridiculous that we have a country that has this kind of means and this kind of wealth and this kind of GDP growth, and we can't figure out how to provide equitable access to great education systems for students who need it. Second is equitable experiences. I think that we need to be thinking about cultural inclusivity, and we could go on forever about the whole CRT crisis and the politicization of education, which is really scary and dangerous. People don't really know what the school choice movement is and what charter schools really represent and the difference between a for-profit or a nonprofit charter, a management organization or charter school. But we need to be thinking about experiences in the classroom that are culturally responsive to the types of students that are in there. So a whole look at content and curriculum is critically important. That's my dream, that's my vision. And then finally is equitable outcomes. We need to really think about indices like an equity index to determine if that's being delivered by the $122 billion that was supposed to go to those students who are underrepresented. Does that represent true equity or true equitable outcomes? And there's a lot of work being done right now at my university, Penn's Graduate School of Education, that's looking at that exact issue to determine or define this is the vision, this is the goal, and these are the tactics and strategies that we're going to implement to get there.
Josh, final thoughts?
You asked and you got it. You know, it seems like a perfect path for education for many, many years. And of course, I'm with John on the equity. You know, for my businesses, being able to reach some of those underserved communities was actually hard because of the way my businesses were set up. It was a blind spot that I always knew about. And I'm happy now at this point that technology can help me and my businesses and the other businesses I work with to reach some of those underserved communities. And so I agree with the vision John has there, and we're going to go out and execute on it.
Awesome. Gentlemen, I cannot thank you enough for sharing your knowledge with us today. And I want to ask everyone, please join our Facebook group because we have other exciting guests, not as exciting as John Gamba, but we have other guests who can help you achieve your goals and achieve your dreams by joining this group, by building this community, because that's what we are all about at Lifelong Educators. So having said that, I hope you all join John on his podcast at 2 p.m. today. Again, it's calendly.com/John Gamba. So thank you, everyone, and I will see you next week, Facebook Live at 11:30, Lifelong Educators. Bye.
Enjoyed being here. Thank you so much. It was really a privilege. Bye-bye.
Okay,
Thank you,
bye.
guys.